Assalamualaikum and good morning to Madam Hazrati and my classmate. My name is Aqil bin Muhammad ANUAR. My meeting number is 23DBT20F1017. Okay, today I'm going to present ethical issues and public concern on genetically modified food. So before we start the presentation, this is my table of contents. First, we have introduction, definition about GM food, ethical issues, public concerns, my opinion on this issue, and references. So the introduction of GM foods. So genetically modified GM foods are food derived from organism whose genetic material DNA has been modified in a way that does not occur naturally through the introduction of a gene from a direct organism. So the technology is often called modern biotechnology or gene technology, sometimes also recombinant DNA technology or genetic engineering. Currently, available GM foods stem mostly from plants, but in the future, foods derived from GM microorganisms or GM animals are likely to be introduced on the market. Most existing genetically modified crops have been developed to improve yield through the introduction of resistance to plant disease or of increased tolerance of herbicides. GM foods can also allow for reductions in food price through improved yields and reliability. In the future, genetic modification could be aimed at altering the nutrient content of food, reducing its allergenic potential, or improving the efficiency of food production system. All GM foods should be assessed before being allowed on the market. Next, definition about GM food. So genetically modified foods, GM foods, also known as genetically engineered foods, GE foods, or bioengineered foods, are foods produced from organisms that have had change introduced into their DNA using the methods of genetic engineering. Genetic engineering techniques allow for the introduction of new traits as well as greater control over traits when compared to previous methods such as selective breeding and mutation breeding. So first, I will talk about the ethical issues in GM foods. So there is 4 ethical issues that I found. So first, potential harm to human health, potential damage to the environment, negative impact on traditional farming practice, and excessive corporate dominance. So potential harm to human health. The result of most studies with GM foods indicate that they may cause some common toxic effects such as hepatic, pancreatic, or reproductive effects and may alter the hematological, biochemical, and excessive corporate dominance. Another concern associated with GMOs is that private companies will claim ownership of the organisms they create and not share them at reasonable cost with the public. And the third ethical issue is potential damage to the environment. So first, research indicates that GM crop technology can result in a net increase in herbicide use and can foster the growth of herbicide-resistant weeds. In addition, there is concern that the use of GM crops may negatively impact the agricultural ecosystem. For example, biodiversity loss. The use of some GM crops can have negative impacts on non-target organisms and on soil and water ecosystem. And more, the expansion of GM herbicide-tolerant corn and soy, which are twinned with herbicides, has destroyed much of the habitats of the monarch butterfly in North Africa. For example, potential impact on non-target species, potential for increased wilderness, and increase in toxin levels in the soil. So the last ethical issues in GM foods is negative impact on traditional farming practice. First, contamination and economic loss. Many plants are pollinated by insects, birds or wind, allowing pollen from a GMO plant to move to neighboring fields or into the wild. For farmers, the consequences have been severe. Contamination can spark dramatic economic loss for farmers who face rejection from export markets that ban GMOs. Organic farmers suffering contamination can lose their organic certification and the premium they earn for their organic crop. And next, super weeds and super pests. GMO agriculture has led to super weeds and super pests that are extraordinarily difficult for farmers to manage. Farmers affected by resistant pests must revert to older and more toxic chemicals, more labor or more intensive tillage, which overshadow the promised benefits of GMO technology. Furthermore, I will talk about the public concerns on the GM foods. So the public concerns on this GMO is controversies and public concerns surrounding GM foods and crops commonly focus on human and environmental safety, labeling and consumer choice, intellectual property rights, ethics, food security, poverty reduction, and environmental conservation. For example, GMO toxicity, fears, and scientific analysis. After genetically modified foods were introduced in the United States a few decades ago, people independently reported toxic effects caused by GMOs. One example is an anti-GMO advocacy group called the Institute for Responsible Technology (IRT), which reported that rats fed a diet containing a GMO potato had virtually every organ system adversely affected after just 10 days of feeding. The IRT stated that the toxicity was the result of genetic modification techniques and not a specific case for that particular potato. They claim the process of making the GMO caused it to be toxic and thus all GMOs were high risk for toxicity. So, for my opinion on this issue, so there is pros and cons of these GMO foods. So I will talk about the pros first. So the first pros is GMOs may have fewer pesticides. Many GMO crops have been altered to be less vulnerable to insects and other pests. For example, BT corn is a GMO crop that has a gene added from Bacillus thuringiensis, a naturally occurring soil bacteria. This gene causes the corn to produce a protein that kills many pests and insects, helping to protect the corn from damage. And second, GMOs are usually cheaper. This is because GMO crops are bred to grow efficiently. This means that farmers can produce the same amount of food using less land, less water, and fewer pesticides than conventional crops. And the last one is GMOs may have more nutrients. This is because certain GMO crops are designed to provide more nutrients like vitamins or mineral. For example, researchers have been able to create a modified form of African corn that contains 2 times as much folate when compared to traditional crops, 6 times as much vitamin C when compared to traditional crops, and 169 times more beta carotene than traditional crops. So the cons of GM food is first, GMOs may cause allergic reactions. Because GMO foods contain DNA from other organisms, it's possible that the new DNA can trigger allergies in people who will not normally be allergic to the foods. And next, GMOs may increase antibiotic resistance. For example, when GMO scientists insert new DNA into plant cells, they will often add in an additional gene that makes the modified cells resistant to antibiotics. They can then use an antibiotic to kill off any plant cells that didn't successfully take in the new DNA. So, in my opinion, there are pros and cons from the GM foods. The pros of GM crops are that they may contain more nutrients, are grown with fewer pesticides, and are usually cheaper than their non-GMO counterparts. And the cons of GMO foods are that they may cause allergic reaction because of their altered DNA, and they may increase antibiotic resistance. So this is my references, and that's all from my presentation. Thank you for watching.